Okay, welcome to another Trek Sumo video. This one's going to be a review and a discussion about the Garmin Tactix Delta. I've been wearing this watch now for almost exactly a year. I've used it a fair bit, so I can talk a little bit about my own experiences with it, cover some of the same pieces that I talked about in the original blog review, and hopefully help guide you as to whether this is a watch that might be right for you. I would strongly recommend that if you are interested in this watch, you also watch James's video about the Garmin Fenix 6, which I will try to link to up there, maybe. They're quite similar watches in many respects. They've got a lot of the same features. The Garmin Fenix 6 is a little bit cheaper, so if there are particular features in the Tactix Delta that you don't want, it might well be that the Fenix 6 is a better watch for you, so it's worth doing that comparison and having a look. Start off talking a little bit about the appearance of the watch. As I said, it's similar to the Fenix 6, and essentially it is very much like the largest Fenix 6, which is the 51mm case, so it's quite wide, quite bulky on the wrist. That's going to be fine if you like chunky watches, it's fine if you have big wrists. If that's not the look that you like, or you've got very small wrists, it might be that this is a bit big for you, and you do have the option then to go with the Fenix 6 and get one of the smaller watches. The Tactix Delta only comes in one size, and that size is big, so that's certainly something to bear in mind. The other main change to the Fenix 6 is the look of the top. It has this, unlike the Fenix 6 that has the sort of sloped silver bezel, the Tactix Delta has a flat one with the little screws in. It's a little bit more, I guess, military looking. It's all black. It's quite resistant to scratching and so on. Aside from that, it is relatively chunky as well. It's quite wide. It's got a lot going on in there, obviously, particularly with all of the biometric sensors and so on. And on the back, you've got the charging port, which is now a fairly standardized charging point that finally Garmin uses the same charger on all of their watches, which is great because if you have got a previous watch and you've got a charger, or you've bought one of the aftermarket chargers that you can get, this will fit it. And you're not going to have to be worrying about those specific clip-on chargers that they used to have. And then it's got the LED sensors that do not just heart rate, but now oxygen saturation as well, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we look at the biometrics. It uses the 5-button layout, which is pretty standard on all of the non-touchscreen Garmin watches. So if you've had a non-touchscreen watch, the kind of broad way that the watch works will be very familiar to you. And essentially you have sort of up and down buttons at the left, the light button at the top. The top right is usually select or start stop, and the bottom right is usually back or cancel, and obviously exactly what those buttons do will depend on what mode you're in and what you're doing at that moment, but it is quite easy to navigate through. So probably the first thing to talk about is what I think of as like the everyday use watch. So essentially, like all Garmin watches, and particularly now that they're moving into the kind of smartwatch lifestyle crossover, rather than watches that are designed to just be put on for an activity, worn for that activity, and then taken off again, they have a kind of everyday mode. For some people that will be really important. If you are somebody that's only putting it on for activities, it might be less so. But essentially in everyday mode, you're obviously going to have the watch face on the front. That is completely adjustable. You can select from all sorts of different views, whether it's analog or digital, and you can then choose what information displays on the front. If you choose one of the digital views, you can potentially have quite a lot of different information fields. The analog views don't have quite as many fields, but you can certainly select things like date, remaining battery. If you want to show one of your biometric fields, like how many steps you've taken, your sleep score, one of the new ones like stress or body battery or something like that, you can certainly put that on the front. Again, it does depend on which interface or which view you've chosen and how many fields that has available. You'll also get notifications from your phone if you've paired it to a smartphone. That's really useful. It's one of the big reasons that people wear smartwatches now. I love it day to day. Obviously, when you get emails and texts and things come in, they just appear on there. You can click into them and view more detail, or you can dismiss them. Again, massively handy when you're out on a run. I really like the fact that I get the notifications on the watch, so I don't have to look at my phone when I'm on a run. And then aside from that, you have a number of widgets that you can set up. You access those by scrolling down, and that will give you a little bit of information. So on my watch, and this is just purely what I've set up, there are lots of other ones available, I have notifications. I have a couple of different time zones where I can see the ones I've set up, one for LA and one for Houston. I can see a little bit of information about the weather, sunset and sunrise, ABC, which is the altimeter, barometer and compass, my body battery, steps, intensity, minutes, and so on. And then each of those you can click into for more information. So for example, the weather one is really nice. It gives a little bit of information, but then when you click into it, you can see more. You can see upcoming over hours, you can see upcoming over days. And again, all of these widgets will have more information depending on what's there. If I click into the notifications, I can then see the specific notifications that I've received over the last few hours and look at those in more detail. You can add to those, you can remove them. There are lots of different widgets available, and you can just pick what you want to see in here. Obviously, the big thing I find with this is that the more information that you put in, obviously the more you're going to have to scroll through, and in a way that just buries information. So you do have to think a little bit about like what's actually really useful and what's going to be important, and focus on that, but that's entirely to the individual. If you press and hold on the top left, which is otherwise the light, you get a few more settings. You can power off, you can see information about the battery, set up timers, save location, go into night vision mode. That's something that's specific to the Tactix, which the Fenix 6 doesn't have, that can be useful if you're wearing night vision, which is going to be something particularly relevant to the military. That kind of covers the everyday use. There are various other things you can do within that. Then the other side of the watch really is the activities, and here the amount of activities is enormous, but basically they fall into one of two types. You have ones that use GPS to track you and ones that don't. The ones that don't, so strength being an example, they will record your heart rate, and they might record other things that they can get from the watch. So the strength one, it can automatically record reps, and it's quite good actually at detecting what type of exercise you're doing just based on the way the watch is moving. But obviously it's intended to be used without GPS, so it's not recording a track or a distance. The ones that do use GPS, that would be running, cycling, outdoor swimming, but not lap swimming, that works differently. Hiking, of course, all of those kinds of things. They will need to first connect to the GPS, and then once they've done that, they'll start recording your distance that you're running, the time, and then make all sorts of inferences from that about pace, and so on. They'll also record your heart rate, and then you can decide what information you want to view while you're running. So the heart of the activities is the other fields that you see while you're running. In this example, I've got heart rate at the top, distance, timer, and average pace. You can set up multiple pages, so I can scroll through. I can see the exact same information then for lap, so it's quite useful to be able to see distance, time, and pace overall, and distance, time, and pace for the current lap. The laps I have on my watch set to auto lap every mile, so that gives me information per mile and information overall, really useful. I then just have time and the map, which is handy when I'm out running. You can set up as many different screens as you want, and within the screens you can set up how many different fields you want to see and what information you want to see in those fields. So it can be really custom, and of course you can make it different so that what you see when you're running is different to what you see when you're hiking, to what you see when you're cycling, and so on, which is what you'd expect. And the amount of information that is available there and the sheer range of different fields is really enormous. So there's loads of options for you to customize it exactly the way that you want. In that respect, though, it doesn't differ greatly from the other running watches that are out there. It's basically the same layout, setup, and more or less the same information that's been there in the Forerunner series or the Vivo Active series for quite a while. The big difference that the Fenix 6 has to a certain extent, and the Tactix Delta definitely has, is a lot of additional biometric information that they are starting to bring into their other watches, but they're kind of starting at the top end with the Fenix 6 Pro and the Tactix Delta, and some of this is filtering down. And that includes things that are on other watches, but also things that aren't. So as I list these, I'm not saying that they're exclusive to the Tactix Delta. There's real variation in what appears on what watch, but it's got things like sleep score, VO2 max, obviously heart rate, also blood oxygenation, It looks at training effect, as in whether you're improving or decreasing your training overall. I think I mentioned sleep score. It's now started to do sleep quality, stress, which is a big one that people find really useful. And it makes inferences from that and can tell you information that might impact how you're training. And that's one of the things where Garmin started to really improve, I think, is that they used to just throw a lot of this information at you. And the question was always, well, what do I do with that? What does it mean to me that I'm not sleeping well, or that my VO2 max is decreasing, or that my training effect is merely maintaining when I want it to be improving? What can I do about that? And while on the watch, there's not a great deal of information. When you then go into the Garmin Connect app, it will give you hints and tips, and where you can dig into all of the information, and more there'll be suggestions to say, well, that's what this means, and here's how you could improve on that particular metric. It can just be information overload, but I think particularly for serious athletes or anyone who understands this information and wants to improve the way they train, it's really useful.
So one of my favourite things about the Tactix Delta is how easy it is to use it for navigation. And you can either download a GPX file online, and there's loads that are already available. I use a website called Walk Highlands when I'm hiking in Scotland, and all of their routes have GPX files. So it's literally as simple as you find a route that you like, you download the route to your phone or your computer, you sync it to your watch, and then you can follow it as you run or walk that route. And it can be as quick as a couple of minutes from you reading about a route that you want to do and then you following it on your watch. And similarly, you can tap out the route on something like Garmin Explore. It's just clicking out waypoints and dragging that route out, and then sync it to your watch, and then you can follow it. So I use it all the time if I'm going to do a route that's a little bit unfamiliar, or I'm doing a longer route where I don't just know the way and I want to do a 15-mile loop, and if I get lost and that turns into a 20-mile loop, that's not ideal. Or if I get lost and it turns into a 10-mile loop, it's not ideal either. So it's quite important that I'm following exactly the route that I've planned out, being able to plan it in advance on my phone and then put it onto my watch and then just follow along, which is what I'm doing now. It makes a massive difference.
Another big thing that the Tactix Delta does very well that's particularly relevant to the hiking and tactical use case is battery management. It has the best battery life of any Garmin device that I've ever owned before. On a full charge at standard, in normal use, it will last for 15 days, and it shows that time. If you choose, you can show the amount of time remaining. It will also show you the time available depending on the activity you select. So if you go into running mode, it's not going to last the full 15 days, but it will tell you, for example, that it's going to be 7 days or 3 days or 4 hours. So you know, if I set off on this run, is it likely to last long enough? But it does last a really long time. You're going to have no problem whatsoever on a full charge with doing long, even 24-hour events. If you're doing something like an Ironman and you're slow like I am, it was going to be lasting potentially up to 17 hours. You're not going to have a problem with the charge on the watch as long as you're fully charged. And similarly, going on long hikes, it can be set to record points at varying intervals, which improves the battery life. And if you slow down the intervals at which it records points to every few minutes or even every hour, then it can last for days, if not weeks. And you can put it into expedition mode where it will last considerably longer and just record points much more infrequently. It's not something I've really experimented with yet, but if you're going on a multi-week expedition and you're not going to be able to charge the watch, you do have those options there to keep it running, which is a real plus. Another major selling point of the Tactix Delta over some of the other watches is PacePro. Now it goes back to, I mentioned about being able to download the GPX file for a marathon. You might think, why would I do that? You're not going to get lost when you're running a marathon. One of the benefits is that you can import it into PacePro and then say, I'm doing this marathon, I want to do it at this particular pace, and you can then choose if you want to, for example, run a little bit slower uphill and a little bit faster downhill, run a little bit faster in the first half of the race and slower in the second half, or vice versa, and to what extent you want to get faster or slower each mile. You can adjust all of that, and it will then plan that, because if you've imported the GPX file, it knows what the gradient of the course is. It will know when you need to speed up and slow down, when you're likely to slow down going up a hill, and can then give you the pace that you should be running at to meet your goal for that race, for that course, at all times on the watch, which is really helpful, because anyone who's tried to run a marathon to a particular pace using a Garmin without that knows that you do get into difficulties where you might be doing really well 1 mile, but the next mile is much more uphill, and suddenly you slow down, and then you think, well, I can try and catch that up on the following mile, but how much do I catch it up? Am I overcooking it? And you can have all of that information within the watch. If you don't upload a GPX file, so you don't have the map, you can still use PacePro. It obviously won't then do the gradient analysis, but it can still tell you, you can still select whether you're likely to be doing negative splitting or positive splitting, so speeding up or slowing down each mile or each kilometre, and it can interpret all of that for you and give you the right information. So that's something that I plan to be using on my marathon next month, and I'll be really interested how it goes, and I might well upload a little addendum to this video to discuss using that in practice.
Purely for running, in a lot of ways, the Tactix Delta doesn't offer a lot of functionality that isn't in some of the other running watches that Garmin offers. The Forerunner series, I think, are the main running series of watches. The big advantage I think that the Tactix Delta has, aside from obviously the wider range of other sports and particularly the mapping and navigation, is that it's got the full range of fitness and health tracking and kind of biometrics functionality. And for a lot of runners that won't be particularly important. Not everybody's going to be interested in their oxygen saturation, VO2, sleep and that kind of thing. But if you are interested in that, then the Tactix Delta offers the ability to kind of understand your training and your fitness and your performance in a way that not a lot of other watches in the range do. And for those of us that have got really into the kind of Garmin ecosystem and the amount of information and data on offer, that is quite appealing.
On swimming, it has both the indoor swimming and outdoor swimming. Outdoor swimming works exactly like a run or a cycle ride. It's just using GPS and tracking you. You just happen to be in the water. Indoor swimming works like the old Garmin Swim, which used to be a whole watch just to do one feature that is on this. And that tracks laps. And it basically detects as you kick off the side, you put in the total distance or the length of the pool, so whatever it is, 25 meters or 50 meters. And then each time you kick off the side, it records a lap and obviously increments that. So it knows that the first time is 25 meters, second time is 50 meters and so on. It's very, very good at detecting what is actually a lap and not getting confused by, for example, you stopping in the middle of the pool. Even when I tried to deliberately confuse it by like kicking off the wall and then actually just swimming back and kicking off again, it still didn't get confused. It was very, very difficult to get it to record laps that didn't happen. In fact, almost, I would say, impossible as far as I could do it. It might be there's a way around it, but I was pretty impressed by that. So it means that even if you're doing drills or you move very slowly or you don't do proper full tumble turns at each wall, it's still going to be recording laps pretty effectively. And that's great if you're a keen lap swimmer or a keen indoor swimmer. Talking a little bit about the tactical features on the watch, it's probably not going to be super relevant for everybody, but it is billed as a tactical watch, so that might be something that you'd consider. There are three key tactical features. The first is stealth mode. That disables any track logging or any kind of wireless communication, whether that's Bluetooth or with ANT Plus accessories or anything. So you'll get the kind of in the moment data, but nothing else, no tracking, no logging, none of it will be stored, none of it will be communicated. So if you were operating somewhere where there might be electronic snooping, that would help to kind of lock the watch down. There's the night vision mode, which just makes it a little bit easier to view through night vision goggles. And finally, there's a kill switch you can set up where a particular combination of buttons will kill or just clear all of the information in the watch, which of course, if you've got points, tracks, places you've been, etc. in there, that might be something you'd want to get rid of. Really only going to be relevant, I would have thought, to military users, but this is certainly sold as a military watch, and I know of a lot of military personnel that use it, and those kind of features will be important to them. It does, in common with a few of the Garmin watches now, have the ability to store music and play it. There's a you can sync with Spotify or I think Apple Music and download music directly to the watch or podcasts or anything else, and then play those from the watch. So again, if you don't want to run with the phone, you don't have to. You can be playing it directly off the watch. If you do run with the phone, you can still use it to control music on your phone. So it has a Spotify widget, and you can use it to control what's playing on Spotify on your phone. So you've got both options there. But definitely for people that could like to sort of run light without a phone, being able to just put music onto the watch is going to be a real plus. What I would say is I did find the process of connecting to Spotify from my watch and downloading podcasts and music and syncing to be quite slow and quite unreliable. It's really difficult to get it to connect initially, difficult to keep them synced. It's not something I've really used a lot because I always run with my phone anyway, so it's not a great concern to me, but I did find it a little bit clunky. It might well be something that they improve on with subsequent software releases and updates. Bluetooth is, I think, surprisingly still quite awkward to use sometimes. The watch does have Garmin Pay, which allows you to use contactless payment from the watch, same as a lot of people do on their phone now, and Apple watches had for a long time, and many other watches do. The slightly frustrating thing with it is that I have cards with Monzo, with Barclays, and with Amex, and none of those are currently enabled with Garmin Pay, or they certainly weren't last time I checked. It will happen without a doubt. I expect Barclays will get there first. I'm surprised me that Amex aren't there. I think it's the fault of the bank that they haven't made it a priority to set up on Garmin Pay, because there's work they need to do, and they're probably prioritizing more common usages like Apple Pay first, which I can understand. It's frustrating for me as a user because I would use it. It would be really nice, again, if you run light and you don't want to take your phone or credit cards or debit cards with you, you could pay for things from your watch. Obviously, if you do have cards that work on the watch, then that's a lot better. In the US, I think there are a lot of banks that have set up on Garmin Pay. In the UK, it still seems to be quite a small list. When I last checked, the only major UK high street bank was Santander, although Revolut and Starling, which are kind of Monzo competitors, were also on the list. So it's potentially something to consider if you are a keen Garmin Pay user. You could sign up for one of those and transfer some money to it so that you can use the watch. Overall, I think final thoughts, it's a great watch if this is what you want. It's expensive, it's big, it's bulky, it's got essentially everything that Garmin offers is in this watch. Every time it gets a software update, it gets the latest features. They will, of course, eventually release new things that need new hardware, and this particular model will go out of date, and there'll be a new Garmin Tactix, maybe an Echo, or however they're doing it. But for the time being, this is essentially everything that Garmin offers in one package. So if you want everything and you want to know that you're not going to fall behind, or there's going to be some feature that you want that isn't available in your watch, then pretty much this or the Garmin Fenix 6 Pro is basically what you need. If you're not so bothered about that, particularly if you just want to use it for tracking running, or just use it for tracking your cycling, or you just want something that gives you notifications while you're out and about, or that just tracks your heart rate or your sleep, a lot of that functionality is in watches that are half the price or a third of the price of this. This stands out on the more detailed biometrics, the maps, and features like PacePro, which are not available on some cheaper watches. If that's what you want, it's brilliant. If it's not what you want, then you can definitely get much, much cheaper watches. But certainly, I've loved using it, and I will, without a doubt, get the next Tactix when it becomes available, and sort of stay on this particular range of watches. I think they're superb, and they do everything that I require. If you did enjoy the video and you want to see more of our videos, it would be brilliant if you could subscribe. We'll put a subscribe button somewhere up here. Watch some of our other videos. We'll put links to them there, and they'll appear at the end as well. And of course, if you don't already read the blog, then please do go to treksumo.com and take a look at the blog. There is also a full written blog post review of the Garmin Tactix Delta, which talks about some of the things I've discussed in a bit more detail, so it'd be worth reading that if you're interested. Otherwise, as always, give us a like if you've enjoyed the video, and look out for more videos to come.